The Syrian army condemned the American attack as an act of blatant aggression, with the Syrian foreign minister repeating that Damascus has never and will never use chemical weapons. But that response is going largely ignored in the West. Let's go live to Westminster now. RT's Polly Boyker is there to bring us up to date on some of the international reaction. Polly, what have you been hearing?
Well, the president of the EU Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, has said that he understands the efforts to deter future attacks. And that's interesting because the more world leaders come out in support of the US airstrike, the more it kind of reinforces the US's version of what happened as kind of absolute fact without a shadow of a doubt, even though there hasn't been any investigation or official judgment into who actually carried out that chemical attack. And despite this, the list of countries who have come out applauding the US strike is getting too long to reel off here now, but it includes Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Italy. The French president, Francois Hollande, has said that he and Angela Merkel agree that Assad bears full responsibility for this development. And they've also called on the international community to come together for a political transition in Syria, which sounds like this kind of quiet, creeping repeat of this mantra that we were very familiar with just a few years ago, which is Assad must go. From over here in London, the British Defence Secretary Michael Fallon has said that the UK fully supports the US action, and also that the message that the Brits got from the Americans is that if there were to be a repeat of a chemical attack in Syria, the response from Washington would be the same. Take a listen to the response from the British Defence Secretary and also to the response from Australia after that as well.
This was a very limited, very appropriate, narrowly focused action to attack the airfield, the aeroplanes and the equipment that the United States believe was involved in the gas attack.
The Australian government strongly supports the swift and just response of the United States. And as I said, has been struck at the very airfield from which the chemical attack was delivered.
There are varying degrees of certainty there. So in the first statement, the British Defence Secretary says the base that was hit overnight is the one where the US believes the chemical attacks came from. So there's a margin of error or a room for doubt there, perhaps, from the British side. Whereas once you get to the Australian Prime Minister, he says it was the very airfield from where that attack was launched. So you can see how this is developing. There's been condemnation of the attack as well, first and foremost from Tehran. Iran is one of the biggest supporters of the Syrian government. It's said that any such unilateral strikes will strengthen terrorists and will complicate the situation in Syria. From Europe, Austria has expressed some hesitancy about sort of how quick the US was to jump the gun without UN approval. They've said that these decisions should only be made within the context of the UN Security Council. And from the UK as well, we've had some more responses. Alex Salmond, the former Scottish leader, now the Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the Scottish National Party, he said that airstrikes are no substitute for a policy towards ending the conflict. Such strikes, he says, should take place after detailed examinations. And he's also talked about how sudden Donald Trump's U-turn on Syria has been, and had a dig at Westminster's support for him by saying if the position of the UK government is merely to back any US action, whatever it may be, then they're going to find themselves struggling to keep up with the twists and turns of the Trump administration. We've also heard from the opposition Labour leader here, Jeremy Corbyn. His statement is a marked departure from kind of the chorus of approval that we've heard from world leaders and politicians so far. He said that what the US has done risks escalating this very complicated conflict even further. He's called for an urgent, independent UN investigation, and he's warned that unilateral military action without legal authorization or independent verification risks intensifying this multi-sided conflict.
Sure, I suppose Donald Trump being unpredictable is nothing new, but when it turns into military action, that takes it to a whole different level, of course, doesn't it? And I suppose the condemnation that we've heard from the usual quarters that we would expect, but quite intriguing that only one Western country is showing any note of caution there, and that being Austria, which says a lot about other major NATO members who are just quite happy to accept that what the US did, they think was correct, even though no congressional approval and no United Nations approval. All right, Polly, with the international reaction in Westminster, thanks very much for that.